A few weeks back, I ended up making a post on Spectrum, which is something I try to avoid doing for obvious reasons. This thread was super popular, something like 105 plus pages, 200 plus upvotes, tons of replies, tons of traffic. It remained the number one thread for quite a while until eventually I received a 3-day ban from the overzealous CIG moderation team, as did a few others, and it kind of went into obscurity after that. But I would like to take a moment to read this and then elaborate on how it's going to kind of tie into everything else that's recently happened, especially with the Carrick drama. So the thread was titled, PvP is important for meaningful gameplay. Militant PvE players are disingenuous and destructive. In order for PvP to have importance, everyone has to care about it, even those who are not going to want to participate in it. The harsh reality that people have to accept is that all good games have an ecosystem, and a huge component of that ecosystem are PvP and PvE players. PvE-only players are attacked and killed by bad PvP players. Good PvP players are notified by PvE players through either direct message or, usually, whining. Both good and bad players engage each other, while the PvE players go about their business. Unfortunately, for a vocal minority, their business is complaining on the forums, but I digress. This basic dynamic creates content and meaning for PvP. Otherwise, you're just playing a session-based game where nothing matters. Segregation of the player base to PvP-only areas completely destroys this basic ecosystem and further pushes the game towards meaningless session shooters. A great example of this is Elite Dangerous. I'm not going to pretend to be moderate on this. The single most destructive force to the integrity of a game isn't a PvP player who ganks a PvE-only player that has made the choice to be inept and unable to defend himself. On the contrast, the most destructive force is the malicious PvE player that will engage in what I call player versus developer, or PvD for short. PvD involves making up outlandish scenarios, whining, mass reporting, organizing out-of-game witch hunts, and doing various other destructive behaviors to get their way and eliminate PvP from the game they are playing. Look no further than the moronic notion that Klesher is meant to be a punishment and not a gameplay loop. The PvE player is utterly incapable of punishing you himself by killing you or getting somebody else to do it for him, and instead opts to lobby for developers and by extension the game to do it for them. CIG has so far been very wise to ignore this vocal minority. I hope they continue to do so. Now, what does this all mean? So the basic summary here is that for PvP to have any type of importance, it's in the title, right? Everybody has to care about it. I view players in an MMO game as content. They themselves are actually the content, or their actions are the content, or something that they do generates content. The example of the person being ganked is a great example and the most basic one of generating content. Let's say you're out mining, okay? And as you're mining, a guy comes over and ganks you. That guy now has a crime stat. Whether or not he gets anything out of it or not is irrelevant. He now has a crime stat. He has just become content for the bounty hunter, just as you were content for the pirate. Now, all three of these types of players synergize with each other and are important for each other to coexist in some way. Even if it's an adversarial existence, they still exist. This is what I mean by content. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how all the best games are. That's not just an opinion, it's a matter of fact. Okay? Any game that has true value outside of session-based garbage or raid log PV bullshit like most MMORPGs, PvP has value and matters. It creates danger and it creates value. Okay? That danger creates the value to the product in the game. Look at Eve, right? It's always a classic example is look at Eve. Now, what's interesting about this thread is I also mentioned player versus developer. And player versus developer is something that has just recently happened in terms of the Carrick owner being forcibly boarded by a group of pirates, killed, and then were killed repeatedly as he continued to spawn in his Carrick. Let's not pretend that this guy was spawning in his Carrick because it's his only option. He was spawning in that Carrick and getting killed over and over again because he wanted to generate a case to get those players who killed him punished out of the game. That's it. It is exactly what he was doing. He was not defenseless. He didn't have to do that. He chose to do that. He continued to do that. That was his choice. So I am fully aware of what that guy was doing, and I think anybody with any common sense is as well. Of course, I want to blame the PvPers and call them griefers, but the real griefer and the real piece of garbage, and throughout all of this, it's the guy who was spawning and dying. He's a piece of shit. He knew what he was doing. And he got what he wanted. He got those players suspended. So there's your example of player versus developer. And here's your example of players weaponizing the CIG support staff and the CIG ticket system to use to their advantage. So what I mean by segregation in a PvP/PvP e-game, rather, is that when you cordon off a certain area or gameplay part of the world where the PvPers go, and you're starting to see the beginnings of that, and you're seeing that with Security Post Korea, and you hear the grumblings about it for Pyro being the outlaw system. This is awful for the game. The moment you start segregating PvE and PvP is the moment that the game just becomes another generic-ass session game. You want them to interact. It may sound good in your head that, oh, well, if people want PvP, they can opt into it and they can go over to Security Post Korea. Or if they want PvP, they can opt into it and go over to Pyro. So now you're cutting your player base, you're taking them out of the main world, and you're creating no reason for PvE or PvP players to ever intermingle. That sounds great if you're a Carebear, but Carebears aren't too bright. And therefore, it's not good for the game. They don't know what's good for them. And they definitely don't know what's good for the game. They certainly don't care about what's good for the game. They don't need players to enjoy their game. PvP players need players to enjoy their game. The militant PvE player doesn't care about your enjoyment. The militant PvE player is, again, the most destructive force of a game. And it's being proven right now. So if Star Citizen goes down this route, and they start segregating the players and setting them off their own little areas, it's going to suck. It's going to really suck. And it's going to make that world feel a hell of a lot less lived in. You see it in all these games now. And those are the kind of things I talk about when I say, oh, well, PvP has to matter. You can't give in to these people because they'll ruin everything. The bottom line is that PvP is what is the most important and driving force in any game, whether you want to admit it or not. You can only kill so many NPCs, whether they're brainless or not, until you get bored and want to do something else. And so long as PvP is there to do, you will have that option. PvP gives value, it gives weight. I've gone into this time and time again in my forum posts, and maybe if this video is any type of popular, I'll go ahead and put it up there. But really, right now, looking at this, everything I've said has come true. That they will weaponize the report system. They will weaponize the forums. They will weaponize and turn all these things that are designed to protect players from actual bad actors. They'll weaponize that and turn them against players that are participating in a gameplay style that they themselves don't agree with. Whether they don't agree with it because you're bad at it, whether they don't agree with it because you're cowards, whether they don't agree with it because, quite frankly, they're bitches, right? They just don't agree with it. So they will rather take the bitch route and get these players punished out of game. There's a valid concern for griefing. There is a valid complaint of griefing. I would define griefing as anything that you're doing that goes out of the game to disrupt or maliciously destroy another player's experience, such as pad ramming, blocking, spawning from vehicles, preventing things from spawning somehow. Basically anything other than using direct combat to kill another player. And despite what people think, being pirated, being killed, being ganked, just being flat out murdered for no reason, that's not griefing. That's just being murdered. That's part of the game. And as far as I'm concerned, the moment you launch Star Citizen, you are consenting to being PvP'd. The moment you get in your ship, you have consented to being PvP'd. That's it. Whether you like it or not, that is exactly how it is. So trying to clamp down on what is PvP in this game isn't going to make the game any better. It's not going to stop people from killing you. If anything, it's going to make them more aggressive. It's going to make them want to kill you more. I know after seeing that, I am completely and totally driven to seek out and destroy all of these people, even if I don't gain anything from it, which usually you don't gain anything from it. But I don't play Star Citizen to get any AUEC, right? I play Star Citizen to kill these fuckers and have fun doing it. That's my gameplay loop. That's my gameplay style. Whatever AUEC I get out of that is a nice little bonus. But in the grand scheme of things, I just want to kill these fuckers.